I about 2 minutes after, and I know we had about 20 folks or so sign up for this session, so I think we're okay to go ahead and get started here. Thank you again for joining, everybody. In case I don't know you, my name is Aaron Sturgill. I'm the Customer Success Specialist here at CQ Partners. I've been with CQ coming up on 2 years here, and it's been an awesome experience. So today, we are here to talk about the importance of quality data in your various OMS systems. Just to set some expectations from the top here, this is not going to be anything OMS specific. This is going to be pretty high level, just talking about why quality data matters. And then we're going to be focusing on some foundational variables that are consistent across all OMS systems. So whether you're on Blueprint, Council Year, Cycle Pro, whatever variation of OMS you may be working with, hopefully you're able to get something from this session here today and apply it to your practice. So if you've ever been in your system, you've tried to run a report and you've gotten back a bunch of information that doesn't make sense. Maybe you've tried to run a TNS list only to end up with a list full of patients with active hearing aids or any other variation of that kind of headache. As long as we're applying the foundational concepts that we're talking about here today, we should be able to see those issues disappear for you moving forward. So just a quick agenda for us here today. We've got about 15 to 20 minutes of content planned. I'll talk through what I've got for you. And then if you do have any questions along the way, just drop them in the chat. We'll make sure to address those. And then we'll get everybody back to their day. So right off the bat, as we're thinking of these OMS systems, I really like to think of all of these systems as Swiss Army knives. And the reason I say that is they have so many various tools available, right? So in my example here, you've got these scissors, corkscrew, a little hook, all sorts of stuff, tools I don't even know what you'd use them for. But for our purposes today, we're going to be focusing specifically on those basics, like I said. So your standard knife, your scissors, so to speak. Now, the question, a reasonable question is, why does any of this matter? Why do we need to have quality information going in? And simply put, we have found since I've started here at CQ, we've got over 90 different folks incorporated going through our My Scorecard process, which is a long effort to essentially audit your system and make sure all of your information is accurate. And over the course of that work, we've found that there has been a 14% average revenue growth 6 months after that My Scorecard integration. Not only from that 14% revenue growth, we've seen growth across other areas of key KPIs for your business. So you'll see here we've got 10% unit growth on average. We're not seeing any massive change in your ASP, but we are seeing a 14% growth in revenue and a 4% growth in opportunities conducted. Now, reasonable question is, why is that? What's causing this change? And simply put, what gets measured is treasured, meaning if we are paying attention to this information, being consistent and getting comfortable with our numbers rather than shying away from it or getting nervous around looking at our data, we're able to get more eyes on it and make more effective, high quality decisions that are ultimately going to positively impact your practice. Now, as we go through here, I'm well aware every OMS is different, and that was one element of this presentation that presented a unique challenge as we're going through is how do we talk about each of these systems and apply something that is helpful for everybody. And I'd like us to kind of think of our OMS systems as essentially long math equations, right? And I hope I'm not losing anybody here with this analogy. But in essence, whether you're in Cycle, Blueprint, or any other OMS, every OMS is going to have key functions that we're going to need to follow in order for that equation to give us the proper answer that we need. So as we jump over here and start to look at our foundational variables, the first piece here is, I'm sorry, I see somebody saying this screen can't display presentation. I would maybe recommend hopping out and joining back in on the call. I might be able to fix it for you. So the first piece that we're going to talk about here on our foundational variables is our referral sources. If anybody here maybe has a referral source set as other, that's a very common thing that I see when I'm auditing systems. And the reason that's a challenge is if we're setting up too many patients with other as the referral and subcategory for your referral sources, it becomes effectively impossible for us to do any kind of research on your return on investment for your marketing efforts. It becomes difficult to follow up with any kind of healthcare providers who may be referring patients to you. And ultimately, you just have less information. So just making sure that we've defined those referral sources and that everybody on the team understands why we need to get those into the system. A very common point or pain point that I see among practices is maybe the owner or the director of operations is aware of these referral sources, but front office staff has not received that same information and the explanation as to why those need to be done. So making sure that somebody is following up on that, monitoring those referral sources so that we can get a high quality of information being returned to us. Second most important thing for us is going to be your appointment types, making sure that you've defined things like out of warranty, your sales opportunity appointments. Do you have multiple sales opportunity appointments? That's a huge question for us, is what defines a sales opportunity? Now, for those of you who do managed care work, maybe working with True Hearing or a program like that, I would recommend not setting those appointments as a sales opportunity. That's been confirmed both from Blueprint and Cycle directly, and I would assume that Counselor is the same, but at least here at CQ and when we're working with my scorecard, we do not consider those managed care appointments as sales opportunities. Because it can end up impacting your close rate, your average selling price. There are methods to track those appointments. I definitely say rather than sending it as a sales opportunity, we would probably want it just as a regular appointment, or maybe we're saying managed care or hearing evaluation dash managed care, something like that, so that we can properly identify those pieces. This is the single most important component for me here, and that's your appointment statuses when we're talking about getting your system to work for you properly. So those of you who've worked with me before have definitely heard me say this, but generally speaking, across all systems, unless your appointment has been marked as either completed, canceled, or no-showed, you're opening yourself up to vulnerabilities when it comes to your data integrity. So many of these internal reportings, TNS lists, out of warranty lists, rely on being able to see the most recently completed appointment for your patient. And if we are leaving appointments in something like tentative, confirmed, left message, something like that, the system, and every system is built slightly differently, but Blueprint, for instance, is built to assume that a confirmed appointment was completed. Now, that decision was made because they've made the decision that in general, hearing care professionals tend to forget to mark an appointment completed compared to marking an appointment canceled or no-showed. But from my perspective, we're just, it's a lack of integrity at the end of the day. And it's a simple enough process to make sure that we're reinforcing, following that up with our team. There are plenty of tools within your OMS to be able to quickly check these appointment statuses, so you don't have to go on a wild goose chase through your whole system to find those. So please feel free to reach out to me or account manager if you have more questions about that. And I will be talking about specific reports that you can utilize in at least the three main systems that we're kind of talking about here today, being Blueprint, Cycle, and Counsel here. Moving along here now to companion rate. Now, this is one we talk about a lot here at CQ. And now that I've worked with almost 100 different practices, getting them set up and auditing their data, helping them with their data integrity. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that maybe 10 of those 100 practices are effectively tracking their companion rate on a regular basis and getting an accurate number. It's incredibly common that when we go into these systems, we're seeing 0, 10% companion rate. And 9 times out of 10, I hear from the owners and members of the practice that, oh, that's not right, we just forget to mark it. And you know, at the end of the day, I totally get it. There's a lot going on. You're spinning a lot of plates. You have a lot of responsibilities and a lot of things to get to in a day. However, there's a reason why we think the companion rate is important. For one thing, for me, it's best for the patient, right? Having somebody there in the room with them, helping them to make sure that they are experiencing these new hearing aids to the fullest ability is just good patient care. But beyond that, if you're somebody who's thinking for evaluation, maybe you want to grow down the line, maybe you have a plan to eventually sell your practice, just understand that by having an effectively tracked companion rate, it's a pretty significant differentiator. Again, out of 100 practices, maybe 10 of them are tracking this effectively. So if you can become one of those practices that says, you know what, even though there's a million reasons as to why we couldn't do it, we are going to be a practice that tracks companion rate, that automatically differentiates you from the crowd. And at the end of the day, this data is valuable. It does have a monetary value should you decide to pursue that. Next piece here, looking at aidable rate. Now, this is especially if you're integrated with a system like NOAA, where you have that audiogram and the audiogram information pulling into your patient's profile. That can make this process a whole lot simpler. But just making sure that we get that audiogram and specifically the hearing loss severity into your patient's profile, making sure that we specified that on their patient so that we can then utilize some of these more complicated lists. If we fail to get that aidable information, that hearing loss severity entered for your patient, a lot of these extra tools that your OMS is able to offer you are not going to function. They rely on that audiogram information. And again, ultimately, the purpose of this call here today is hopefully to give you some ideas and some strategies to say, how are we best using our system? Are there some blank spaces? And how could we use these tools to be even better and more effective with helping our patients? So moving along here from our foundational variables, talking about some more unique processes. Now, those variables apply to all OMSs. They may be called slightly different things. They may have slightly different ways of setting them up, but all of those components are going to exist in any given OMS point blank period. Now, these unique processes come down to your tracking, your reporting, your marketing efforts, and those are vary greatly between your systems. But simply put, making sure that we understand our hearing aid sales tracking and understanding how to track the difference between private pay, your insurance, and managed care transactions. That's something that myself or your account managers would be happy to help you with. Also, of course, the OMSs themselves, so reaching out to Blueprint, Cycle, Counselor support. I know the members of their team are always happy to help make sure that your system is properly pulling those reports in that way. Another component here that's unique to each of these systems would running those patient lists, your out of warranty TNS marketing lists, and then of course just general reporting, appointment details, hearing aid sales, and etc. So for a few just kind of general appointment names or report names, I would recommend, if you are a Blueprint user, a handful of reports that you may find valuable is your appointment analysis, your canceled no-show appointments, your hearing aid sale and return detail, managed care transactions, and then your opportunity closing rate. Those various reports will get you all that you need. And apologies for not having these on the slide. I wish I had entered that on there. But if you need this list afterward, please reach out and we're happy to get that for you. For Cycle users, I recommend using your appointment detail, hearing aid sales, and then your managed care patients. That's located under your marketing settings. And then for the Counsel Ear reports, I've been recommend using your total sales report, your hearing aid sales report, and then appointment details will be able to get you for those various pieces. Now, as I'm going through those names of those reports, hopefully what you're noticing is there's a lot more similarities between these systems than there are differences. And it's really just making sure that we understand where this information exists within each system and how we can properly enter that information to be able to utilize it more effectively. So just to draw a quick connection between this, let's say I'm trying to run an appointment analysis from Blueprint, and I want to be able to know how many sales opportunity patients I've had come through my business. If I have failed to properly set up my appointment types, then as I go to run that appointment analysis, I may end up with a report saying I have had 0 sales opportunities, even if I know I have. Maybe there was a button that I failed to click or an option that we failed to set up. Really just understanding that it's very difficult to quote unquote break these systems, and just being persistent with that process. And just talking about persistence, I want to mention one practice in particular that I've worked with recently, called PD Speech and Hearing. They're located in Florida. And for a long time, we were stuck kind of chasing our tails trying to figure out what's going on with their close rate. Every month, their close rate was showing as over 100%. We're talking 140, 160% month over month, trying to figure out what is causing this, right? And what we found was ultimately we needed to redefine their sales opportunities, and essentially we're able to calculate and discover that there was an appointment type that should have been considered a sales opportunity that was not. And that small change that we made has already fixed their reporting. It's more valuable for them. And I just want to the reason I mentioned that particular example is this is something that required months of problem solving on there and being persistent with it. Now, most situations are going to be resolved quickly. That's part of the reason I'm here. Part of the reason your account manager is here is to help support with that process. But just understand that being patient and being tenacious with your data tracking may be required, but the way I see it, it's like a muscle. The more you work it out, the better you're going to get at it, and the more useful this information will become to you. Before I get to our Q&A section here, just want to plug next up. We're going to be having a session on Wednesday, May 21st. With hearing aid search trends with Google, having some representatives from Google joining us on the call and to go through and share their insight with you. Now I'm going to go ahead and take a look. I see no questions in the chat at this point, but if you do have any questions or need for follow-up, please feel free to drop those in the chat now. What does CQ consider an opportunity appointment? So generally speaking, when we're talking about opportunities, we're going to be looking at your hearing aid evaluations. Any out of warranty patient, I would recommend having a separate appointment type for that. You may need to have a proper appointment type or opportunity appointment type for any managed care patients that end up becoming perhaps a competitive advantage or choose to pay out of pocket, to be able to differentiate those. But really any appointment where a patient is coming in and may result in purchasing a hearing aid. Now, the thing that I would recommend also is sometimes I see folks have it set up where there's a hearing aid evaluation, that's set as a sales opportunity, and then maybe there's also a hearing aid fitting that is set up as a sales opportunity. In that context, I'm usually pretty skeptical and want to have a good reason as to why the fitting is also set as an appointment, because we may actually unintentionally end up doubling or inflating your opportunity count in that context. So just understanding that these systems are set up to associate hearing aid purchases within the most recent hearing aid or sale opportunity that is. So just understand that we don't need to have every single appointment set as a sales opportunity. Unfortunately, I'm not terribly familiar with Counselor's setup on this, but I at least know for Cycle and Blueprint both. I believe it's about 90 days, something like that, since the most recent appointment. So we should be pretty comfortable in terms of just setting that hearing aid evaluation. I do have some practices with just one opportunity type hearing aid evaluation, and then maybe they manually mark appointments as needed. But depending on the size and scope of your practice, that's a conversation we can continue to have too. Companion rate. Yeah, absolutely happy to explain companion rate again. So companion rate essentially is just referring, and this is where, quick aside here, this is where some of the language from the systems can get a little confusing. I know for some systems, the companion, as in the person who the patient brought to the appointment, is sometimes referred to as third party, which is also referred to as your third-party payers. So the language can get confusing, but please just understand that companion rate is referring to the patient bringing in a companion. So whether it's the son or daughter, husband or wife, hopefully somebody that they're spending a lot of time with and are familiar with their voice, bringing that person into the appointment to be able to help them make a decision on to whether or not they want to move forward with that hearing aid purchase. Now, every system is going to have the option to track your companion rate. Again, it's going to be slightly different, but usually that's going to be on your appointment summary or appointment event details screen, where in that same section where you may mark your appointments completed, canceled, or no-showed, things like that, you'll also be able to track your companion rate. So for Blueprint, it's just a checkbox. It's right next to the sales opportunity. You click that companion present. For Cycle and Cycle Pro, there's a drop-down menu where it says companion, yes or no, and then you'd enter in their information. If you need further follow-up on it, I'm happy to schedule a call and find a time to get into that. I do have a few other additional variables that are just recommended for general tracking if there aren't any other questions from the group, just things to be considering. Because again, this is super high level here today, but we can get really further down pretty quickly. So some other variables that are kind of universal across the systems that we want to make sure we're keeping track of are things like your cost of goods, making sure that we're properly entering in the manufacturing versus the patient cost. Of course, tracking your sales opportunities, tracking your serialized accessories and orderable items, making sure that we are not cross-contaminating hearing aid units with chargers, FM receivers, things like that. Making sure that we understand the tracking processes for any hearing aid order, right? That's going to be important for our processes too. And the reason why I didn't get into the ordering processes specifically today is because they are varied very significantly between the systems. But if you have any questions about, your private pay versus your managed care hearing aid ordering process, please reach out to us. We're happy to get into that. Another piece here is just making sure that we are always collecting email addresses for our patients. A lot of your systems, especially marketing efforts, are going to rely on having a contact, and especially for Blueprint in particular, there's a lot of free features available to us that if we're failing to set these foundational variables and get that patient contact information, it's effectively impossible to utilize those. So again, just if we're following these basic principles and you feel like you have a good grasp on these foundations, I definitely recommend asking more from your OMS provider, saying, hey, I feel like I'm using the basics, but I want more. See what they can offer you. There's lots of options, and they're always happy to help.